we're going to talk about chapter 2, which is called Treachery of Defeat. So, the literal meaning of this chapter is it's the main character, the protagonist, facing a major battle and seeing the casualties of this battle, of this so called culture war. Um, Basically, death and destruction on a beach. Um, Halfway through the song, his superiors sound a retreat, so he kind of freezes up, sees a lot of people dying around him, and starts questioning, why are we doing this? But makes it way back to the boats, and they leave to fight another day. Um, for allegorical and personal meaning, I think when I wrote this song, I was in the back of my head thinking of my early college days, like especially my freshman year of college. Um, Back at that time, it seemed like the youth group that I grew up in was just falling apart. And many of my friends were seemingly walking away from faith altogether, just kind of living their own lives. And it seemed like that everything that had been built up to that point seemed to be falling apart. And it was something I couldn't really understand or knew how to deal with at the time. Um, how, and I don't mean this of like the institution we came from, because like they're cool people and they really did try. In my honest opinion, they really did. But as a whole, it kind of seemed to me that like the church as a whole kind of turned their backs on my entire generation. Um, at least that's how it seemed to me. I guess 20 years ago. You know, um, it seemed like one day we were like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we were constantly being told that we were gonna go out and do all these incredible things for the kingdom of God, and then next day we were considered full-fledged adults. Overnight you turn 18 years old, you graduate high school, and then nobody seems to give a damn about you. um, I don't know if it's still that way overall in a lot of evangelical churches in America, but it just kind of seemed that way to me at the time. And without like a support structure, it just fell apart. I remember I had to take a youth ministry class my senior year of college, um, since I was like a ministry major, pastoral care, all that stuff. So I have that degree. And in this youth ministry class, I remember the teacher lecturing us and saying that the studies and the trends showed that it was like, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was like 90% of like people uh, in the United States pretty much were going to leave the church by like the end of their freshman year of college, so like 19 years old or so. And she said that the trend was to the extent that 10 years later, once they were nearing their 30s, most, if not all of them, were still gone from the church. They had not returned. And I was, sitting there in this lecture, like, yeah, I see it. It makes sense to me. Um, but then going to college, and I went to a, pretty well known Christian university, uh, well known within like charismatic and Pentecostal ranks. And it was it was its own bubble in a lot of ways. And maybe there was a culture war even there of a sorts. And I don't feel like going into a whole lot of that. I've talked about it in stuff in the past, and I just I'm so like far removed from that kind of culture and atmosphere that it for the most part doesn't really affect me anymore. But like living in it for basically 5 years of my life, yeah, it was an experience. I'll just put it that way. And it wasn't all bad. I met like a lot of really cool people, did a lot of cool things, learned a lot of good information, and I learned a lot of bad information, or rather like ways that I don't want to live my life by kind of seeing a lot of the stuff that went on around there. Um, so I mean, I think overall it was a positive experience, um, and kind of an example that all things can work for good, and that includes like seeing bad stuff that you don't like and realizing, hey, I I don't want to believe that way. I don't want to act that way. And so, like, it becomes sort of like a negative reinforcement or something along those lines. Maybe that's not the right word, but I'll just go with it. Um, and I guess for me too, like being in that college atmosphere, like in high school, maybe I was wrong, but I sort of had this mentality in the back of my head that I might be the only, you know, Christian Christ follower that is around or whatever. So, like, my behavior, my witness, my walk, like, meant something more. Like, it was maybe solipsistic in a way, maybe it was skewed. Looking back, I think it was at times, but there was something genuine about it as well that, like, I legitimately wanted to be a good example of Christianity to the people around me. Because it was a secular high school and stuff like that. But then you step into a Christian school environment and you're just another face in the crowd. And it doesn't really matter at that point whether or not, like, you walk the walk or not, because everybody's just kind of in this mentality, and that it's its own kind of culture war of sorts. And so, like, I never felt like I felt it. Like, I never felt like I fit in to that institution. Um, and because of a lot of things going on in my life at the time, I started developing a lot of questions, um, and what it meant, to deal with suffering, and, God not seemingly fixing problems just like that. And so I think this song is a lot about like a reflection of that kind of period in my life. Um, and like lyrics wise, there's like a line like, by the hoary hosts of this kingdom that I growl. And I think I wrote this as like a subtle nod, towards, like my love for comic books, because I'm a big comic nerd and collect comic books. And it's like that, like, hoary host kind of line is something you would find, I guess, like in Doctor Strange or something like that. um, but then, in all seriousness, there's line, yet here I am, comrades engulfed by the grave, enemies praying tongues with mirrored varied hues on cross stitched uniforms. So, like, that's kind of talking about this culture war wasn't even just necessarily against, like, heathens and Christians or whatever, but it's even like a civil war sort of thing where it's Christian pitted against fellow Christian. Um, and yeah, all claiming adornment in the exact same regalia, while entrails litter a shore of fractured bones and barbecued skin. You know, pretty messed up language. It's supposed to be. It's about war. It's about people dying. And, maybe it's unfair for me because I've never served in the military. I've got a lot of friends out there who are or have, and some of them have been in battle. And maybe it's unfair for me to write such language. I don't know. Um, Maybe it's hyperbole. Who knows? Um, but I just want to dive into the point that there are clear consequences to these kind of mentalities. Um, it's really as simple as that. Um, so there's a section like in the middle of the song that um, I got inspiration from listening to old Dillinger Escape Plan to do. It's kind of this like creepy, drony section, with like some falsetto in the background. And um, I think the song's called "We Are the Storm" from Dillinger Escape Plan. It's from like their Miss Machine album. And I just wanted it to sound creepy. But like I started yelling in it, this they don't teach in the Lord's army nor seminaries, the cost of failure, the sting of betrayal, the treachery of defeat. Um, I mean, that isn't something that you typically talk about in, your religion classes in university, is what it's like seeing, people fall around you and seeing your own failures and seeing people you look up to morally fail, or um, being betrayed by some of the people that you trusted the most. Like, they don't teach you how to deal with that sort of stuff. Um, so, I mean, I think a lot of it deals with those betrayals that I encountered over the years, and just feeling like there were casualties around me, and maybe this abstract or metaphorical sort of way. But it, for a long time, like, I couldn't understand it. Why is this happening? um and, looking at my notes here, um I remember there was a certain kind of indoctrination within a culture that I was part of at one time, of kind of being unaffected by exterior reality, or exterior outcomes, that it was only about what's going on inside here. But you know then I was seeing all these like messed up things happen over time, and it's like, how can you not be affected by your environment around you? um I mean, maybe ultimately you sort of have to separate yourself and look to Jesus, um to get through those things in your faith. But I just could never understand, like, because to me it's like a denial of reality, a denial of the injustices that you see going on around you. Like, it just doesn't fly with me. Um, so like, pretty much in short, there's the last line that says, "In His true kingdom does our ethic make us unjust," and that I think is where a lot of this song kind of hinges on that final line of that rhetorical question of not just looking at others and their failures, but also looking at, you know, myself, or like in this case, in this song, the protagonist asking himself and questioning whether or not um, he's a just man or not. So that's pretty much chapter two in a nutshell.